Welcome to this meeting of the local review body of the 22nd of August. I can confirm the meeting was properly called and is quorate. Please can I ask members to nominate a chairman for this meeting?
Could I nominate Councillor McKee?
I second that.
Councillor McKee, are you willing to accept this unanimous nomination?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of local review body, Tuesday 22nd of August. I'll start off by reminding everyone present that this meeting will be recorded and the recording will subsequently be available for public listening. The next item is yourself, Claire. Take us through the process, please. Oh, sorry, Sederunt, apologies. I think we're all here, aren't we?
Yeah, can confirm there's 5 members present. No apologies.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? Oh, thank goodness. Thank you. Right, Claire, if you want to go through the process, please.
Okay, thank you. Chairman, I can confirm we have 3 notices of review for consideration at this meeting. First being item 4, site adjacent to 7 St David Street, KIRKPATRICK, Durham. Refusal of approval of matter specified in conditions. Application in respect of erection of dwelling house. Approval of matter specified in conditions 2, layout, 3, design, 4, external appearance, and 5, landscaping of planning permission in principle. 16P20093 16/1794/ARC. So in your papers you have the notice of review and related documents, report and handling and related correspondence, observation of the appointed officer and the applicant's notice of review, comments of the applicant's agent on observations of the appointed officer, planning application forms, plans and supporting documents, the decision notice of Dumfries and Galloway Council, relevant extracts from the Dumfries and Galloway local development plan, photos of the application site and locality. The grounds of refusal are in this case on page 120, being the proposal is contrary to policies H2 and OP2 of the local development plan and associated supplementary guidance, in that the siting and design of the dwelling house would fail to have regard to the layout and character to the adjacent dwellings and the surrounding area of which it would form part. Furthermore, it does not adhere to the requirements of condition 2 of planning principle and planning principle reference 16P20093. The requested methods of determination, in this case on page 8, being the applicant has requested that the review be dealt with on the basis of an assessment of your review documents only, with no further procedure. In summary, the grounds stated in the notice of review are the reasons given for the refusal of the proposal are weak. The design of the house took into account the applicant's own needs and also the policy and guidance of the local planning authority. There are several houses in KIRKPATRICK, Durham with gables facing the public street. The design of this house is in keeping and reflects scale and layout of other dwellings in the close vicinity. The pre-dwelling assessment came to the conclusion that support should be given to the well-defined enclosed brownfield nature of the site because it may result in a rounding off opportunity. There would be a major benefit in removing a substantial commercial use from the centre of the village with its traffic and visual implications. The dwelling house proposed with accord with LDP policies OP2 and H2 and the supplementary guidance on housing in villages. The decision fails to reflect the positive opinion expressed in the pre-application advice or the compliance of the proposed design with the relevant development plan policies. Reference was made to the 2 other developments, the examples provided at Moffat and Meikle. I don't know how to say that. Meikle. There.
Meikle Emambre.
Yeah, sorry, apologies. as they are absolutely contrary to LTP policies H2 and OP2. The planning department as a whole cannot continue to cover their inconsistencies by saying each planning application received is assessed on a case-by-case basis depending on the particular circumstances of the proposal. Surely, if there is policy in place, then every application should be treated the same in relation to this policy. You have the further comments of interested parties, being the comments of the appointed officer and further comments of the applicant's agent. You also have the relevant development plan, policies, and other material considerations. So the main issue for the local review body that may wish to consider are: does the proposal conform with the relevant development plan policies? Specifically, does the proposal in terms of its siting and design fail to have regard to the character and layout of the adjacent dwellings and surrounding area of which it would form part? Would the dwelling house fail to meet the requirements set out in condition 2 of planning permission in principle reference 16P20093, which provides the following: the layout of the site would reflect the scale and layout of the dwelling houses and gardens in the area, with the dwelling house fronting the track and long garden to the rear. If not, are there any material considerations which would indicate that planning permission should be granted to the contrary? So again, having outlined the documents, it now falls to the LRB to determine whether, firstly, it has sufficient information to consider the review. It's confirmed that there will be no representations from any party heard today. The options available to the LRB for this and the following two cases today are that it can decide it has sufficient information before it to enable it to determine the review, request further information in the form of written representations. If you were going to do this, you'd have to state precisely who would provide the information and what information you were seeking. Resolve to hold a hearing, again specifying who would be invited to speak on what matters. Resolve to hold a site visit, accompanied or unaccompanied, which obviously can be done in conjunction with any of the above, but would not allow a decision to be made today. And if the local review resolves that it has sufficient information and there are no further procedures required, then the local review body has full powers to uphold, reverse or vary a determination. The decision notice would include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority had decided the case reviewed. You have an independent planning advisor present at your meeting. He is here to assist on all the items today. It is confirmed he has not had any involvement in the cases and was not the case officer or the appointed officer for the applications. He is here purely to provide independent advice as needed on matters of planning policy, law or process in relation to the local review body. So if members are clear and no further clarification is required, I will now ask your chairman to lead you through the debate in first instance, to lead the LRB through the agenda papers together to decide if you have sufficient information.
Right, thank you very much, Claire. What I would look to do is take you through a section at a time. I'll try and give you the page numbers for the relevant sections. First of all, start off with section 4, notice of review, page 3 to page 14. If you have any questions you want to ask in these pages, please ask the question. Councillor Hislop?
It's just with regard to the actual address of the site. It says 7 St David Street, but it's also within one of the planning site adjacent to 7 St David Street. And it doesn't actually front onto St David Street.
Response to that?
I think it's page 7 in the actual application details.
I think there's a picture, page 15 onwards, there's a few site pictures provided by the applicant, I think. And this might, although it's a private farm road. Councillor Maitland?
Could I draw members' attention to page 113, where we've got a block plan, and you can actually see the numbers of the houses. I think, and if you look there, Chairman, at the block plan, you can see that it's adjacent to the back garden.
Chair, I was looking for the application form. I found it on page 103. So this was the form submitted by the applicant's agent in relation to this, and when it says description of proposal, It describes it as erection of dwelling house, but critically it says at site adjacent to 7 St David Street, Kirkpatrick, Durham. So that the description that's been given to the site is the same as the applicant's description on their form.
It was just on the actual notice of review, it said site address 7 St David.
Anybody get anything else in item? The first item? Notice of review. You've got the pictures. Right, section 2, report on handling, page 63. Through to page 72.
Can I ask about the condition on page 67? We're there, are we? Page 67, that's all right. It was saying that the layout of the site, it's condition 2, the original planning application, actually required. So if I've got that right, that is part and parcel of what we need to comply with today. If we're going to comply with policy, we have to comply with that particular condition, which was part and parcel of the planning permission in principle. Is that absolutely clear? Is that right?
Just for the avoidance of doubt, Chair, it's a good question. There was a planning permission in principle granted, first of all, which is the parent permission, if you like. So that's 16P293. On page 67 at paragraph 4.5 of the report on handling, it draws attention to condition 2 of that planning permission in principle decision, which gives guidance regarding the layout of the site that has been drawn attention to. So that's at the foot of page 67. That this application is for the approval of matters specified in conditions. So if you like, it's the detailed part, the follow-on part, providing detail relative to that permission in principle. So it must abide to the conditions set out in the permission in principle. The way of avoiding that is simply to make a freestanding application, but that's not what's been done in this case. This is a submission made for the approval of matters specified in conditions in respect of that permission in principle, the earlier one, 16P293.
Okay, I come back in, Councillor Maitland. Councillor Hislop.
I think there's somewhere in here it says about fronting the track. Now, how do you deem which face is the principal frontage? Because I've seen houses with gable ends onto a road. I've seen houses with faces with the gables down the side, but the access has been off. And I think one of the arguments in here is that there's a door leading in from, or the front door's coming in from the track side. How do we assess what is the principal frontage of this building?
Chair, it's a matter for, Chair, it's a matter for your interpretation. My view on it is going back to page 67 on the bottom of that page, paragraph 4.5. It says the layout of the site should reflect the scale and layout of the dwelling houses and gardens in the area, with the dwelling house fronting the track and long garden to the rear. My reading of that is the principal elevation of the dwelling house fronts the track that you can see on the location plan, and it has a long garden to the rear as well. As to what you view as being the principal elevation of the dwelling house is ultimately a matter for interpretation. But my view in that is the longer, more formal elevation of the proposed building, if you like, should be fronting that track with a long garden to the rear of it is the kind of guidance that's my interpretation of the condition. But obviously, sitting as a local review body, you've got to arrive at your own interpretation of that condition. Well,
it was just, I think, that a string of explanations about constitutes a principal elevation can be read on page 78. So you can work your way through and decide whether or not the bits on the plans actually conform with that particular proposal. I'm sure we'll come to that.
Well, we can move to that section now, I think. That's comments for the planning application. Page 73 to page 90.
I do want to, I think it probably comes into the section, I do want to just ask about the reason that we are not taking into account the fact that the box dormer, or the dormer, has been removed, as I understand it. Is it that in terms of procedure, actually the dormer had not been removed from this as proposed? Because it's, you know, the correspondence makes it clear that the dormer actually has been removed, or it's been agreed to be removed. On page 79, we have replaced with the Velux arrangement.
Chair, my reading of the case is that when you look at the decision notice on page 120, it's relative to the siting and design of the proposed dwelling house. So those are really the two key issues you're looking at, siting and design, and that is considered by the appointed officer to be contrary to policies H2 and OP2 of the local development plan and associated supplementary guidance, by virtue of the fact that they view that it would fail to have regard to the layout and character to the adjacent dwellings and surrounding area of which it would form a part. There's also reference here to condition 2 of the planning permission in principle. In terms of what the design actually is, I would draw your attention to page 115 of the papers. So you've got elevational drawings and floor plans there. Now, on the northwest elevation, you can clearly see a proposed box dormer there. So the box dormer was part of the officer's consideration, but it's a more holistic case of general design, is my reading of it. It's not really one feature in particular. It's more the overall package, if you like, as presented. When there's reference to design, it's the overall design of the proposed dwelling house, is my reading of it.
Okay, so what we'd be considering then is the whole and the siting, as well as the particular small elements of design, which is the dormer, which actually has been agreed to be wrong by the applicant, but it's not in this particular application. Okay, right, fine, thank you.
Anybody else any questions? No. Go to page 91, observation of the appointed officer. Page 91 to 95, or 94. Councillor Maitland?
I'm just looking at, I suppose we're drifting on to the next bit. I mean, the page 94, paragraph 5, which then goes back to this whole business about the current application is for planning permission for approval of matters specified in conditions relating to the original planning permission. And I go on and read the comments in the next section, Chairman, which I accept I'm moving forward faster than you were, on page 97.
Well, we could take that section as well if you want.
Thank you very much. And I simply take it that I don't think that the agent has completely understood, actually, what was meant to be the case. I mean, they could have come back with a completely separate and new application, I presume, which then we could have considered absolutely cleanly, as opposed to, which the officers could have considered cleanly, as opposed to the refusal for the approval of matters specified because it does not comply with condition, as the officer says. And if the applicant's agent had actually said to the applicants, I suggest that we accept that it's not absolutely compliant and go for a separate application, they could have done that. That's still within the bounds of possibility. Whatever we do today, that can still be done. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? That'll take us up to page 100. Right, put the planning application form, page 103 through to page 116. If you've no issues there, we'll go to section 6, page 117 to page 124, application, the decision letter from the Dumfries and Galloway Council, 19th April 2017.
No questions, Chairman. Could we see them?
Thanks, Chair. Just for the avoidance of doubt for all those present, these are exactly the same pictures as appear in the papers from pages 205 to 210. I have not been to the site. These have been supplied to me, these pictures. So the first one is a view showing the application site on the left-hand side. As you look at it there, your best reference point in looking at the pictures in terms of a plan is probably the location plan on page 111 of the papers. So you've got a site plan there and a location plan. So you're looking along with the site on the left-hand side towards Walton Road in this direction, with the site on the left-hand side. It's a view showing the application site on the left-hand side. It's obviously further back along that lane, looking towards the centre of Kirkpatrick, Durham. So looking again towards Walton Road. It's a view taken from within the site, looking towards the southeast this time, and then looking to the east. In this case, you can see the larger property that is located there, and then from further within the site, that's also a view looking towards the east as well. You've obviously got a few smaller buildings there, a garage and a smaller shed. Next one is in a different view altogether. This is looking towards the northwest, so it's looking along the access kind of lane, if you like, on the left-hand side there, towards the northwest, and that's from within the application site. And the next view is looking more due west from within the application site, so towards that access track itself.
That hedge on the left there, is that a dividing line between two sites, or is it all one site?
I think that is the boundary between two different sites.
So that hedge on the left and the hedge on the right over the boundary, site boundary.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
This is a view looking southeast from the site boundaries. You've got the site on the left-hand side.
Okay, we've been through all the papers. Do you consider you've got enough information to make a decision on this application?
Yes, Chairman, I propose we have enough information
Okay.
to decide today.
Anybody otherwise minded? No? Right. If you have any questions on the overall paper or pictures or whatever, any more questions? So Hislop?
With regard to this, have we the ability to look at this as a planning permission by itself, the actual, you know how certain things go up to reviews up at the Scottish Government and they can take different things into consideration from the original planning permission? Do we have that same ability to look at things sort of from a bare earth proposal? So we could actually say what's there would meet the criteria, because it says in here if it was a brand new planning application, then they may not be found to be foul of the conditions. Have we got the power to do that, or must we look at it from it's a change in condition that we're looking at?
With all due respect, this is an application that we are considering. We can't say to the applicant, take it away and change it. We've got to make a decision on this application. Is that what you're...
No. What we have in front of us is the application it's in. Now, have we to consider this as a change to the conditions of the planning in principle, or can we look at this with fresh eyes and say this is a fresh planning application with this and disregard the planning in principle today? Have we had the ability to do that, or as a committee have we to take into consideration the conditions previously applied?
Chair, I'll try and explain the process. There's a planning permission in principle being granted at this location subject to conditions for a dwelling house. So the principle of a dwelling house at this location has been established. There's a permission in place. Now that permission at 16P293 has various conditions attached. Now because it was only a permission in principle application that was granted before, there weren't any matters of detail submitted with that. So as a result, you have matters specified in conditions, which includes layout, design, external appearance and landscaping. So a submission's been made to provide those details for consideration. So that's providing that extra information. So that's what's under assessment here. So you've granted the principle of the case, or the appointed officer has in this case. This is a second follow-up application, which is fulfilling the requirements of those conditions to submit the extra information for consideration. So what you're deciding today is that extra information acceptable or not in its own right? It's not re-examining the principle of the case. The other issue you've got here as well is the conditions requiring extra information. You have a condition which is guiding the development, you know, the one where you're looking at the principal elevation, you know, the one that's in discussion between the applicant's agent and the appointed officer, who have different interpretations of that condition. You have that guiding the development, so there is another question of whether the detail you've got complies with that condition or not. If you look at the appointed officer comments in pages 91 to 94, the appointed officer expresses a view on that guiding condition as well. When you look at the applicant's agent's comments relative to that on page 95, they've got a very different view about whether or not they've complied with that guiding condition as well. And it's very much a matter of interpretation. So what you're looking at here is, you know, is the collection of information that's been submitted as a follow-up to the permission in principle, is it acceptable? And is it also complying with that guiding condition that's within the permission in principle or not? You know, you can't ignore the guiding condition. It's a question of whether it complies with it or not. If you think it's something completely different, you know, it doesn't comply with that outline, permission in principle rather, then there is an obvious difficulty there. And what the appointed officer is saying in their comments is, if an applicant got a permission in principle and they weren't happy with the guiding condition, they could then make an application to change the condition effectively in the permission in principle to try and remove it or vary it, or just make a freestanding full planning application again, which would look at both the principle and the detail of the dwelling house at the same time. But this is, if you like, it's like Russian dolls. This is the second part of the permission in principle. This is the actual detailed part. So it's a question of, does that detailed part sit neatly within the permission in principle, such that you feel you can give it permission, or does it conflict with that? Does it meet your policy? Does it not? These are the kind of things you're looking at, but it's very much the detail, not the principle you're looking at here.
Okay. Councillor Maitland, do you want to comment?
Well, I just get to comment that that applicants do that all the time. I mean, they apply to set aside a condition of in a planning permission in principle. It's not unusual that they do that. I think what's set out helpfully in 94 in paragraph 5, it's quite clear, and that's certainly how I would look at it. I mean, I think if we're going to follow our processes, then there is a way out for the applicant. We can come back again, but if we are being asked to decide whether or not we think the current proposal actually complies with the conditions set in the original and parent planning permission, I would have to say it doesn't. I mean, the main frontage, and I do confess it's quite difficult to decide what is the main frontage in this particular building. On page 115, the pictures. I mean, for a start, actually, the building is not even aligned exactly with the track, which was one of the things that was wanted to be achieved. The southwest elevation is not aligned with that track leading up to Walton Street. Walton Road, thanks. I think where it's positioned in the plot is rather strange. It gives all the patios and all the rest of it facing north, and everything is pulled down towards one end of the plot. It just struck me as really rather strange. I think if I was to come up to this building, I wouldn't exactly know, just if I was looking at at it, where I was supposed to go in, just looking at those elevations. So, given what we're looking at the moment, which is whether or not it complies with that particular condition, I would suggest, Chairman, at the moment, that I'm doubtful that it does. But I would like to hear what other elected members have to say.
Councillor Hislop.
Chair, I would have to agree with Councillor Maitland. If we had the ability to look at it from bare earth, then I think it's a different kettle of fish. But this one is actually looking, does it match the conditions we've put in place? Now, it's quite clear under page 94 at paragraph 5, there are other routes to achieve possibly what they wish to achieve. Not a guarantee that they would achieve it, but what they've asked today, it does not meet the requirements of the condition. But if they were to put in a full one, they may get something, because we can't prejudge that until it comes in. So I'm in agreement with Councillor Maitland in this issue.
Councillor James, Councillor Fairbairn, are you otherwise minded that we uphold the decision of the officer? Councillor Fairbairn?
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I kind of follow Councillor Hislop and Councillor Maitland's position, but it clearly states in the whole of 4 that that it has to be put back to a traditional style cottage. It's been made clear throughout the whole thing. So I mean, any concessions, and obviously you're going to review that again if you're going to, they're going to submit another plan application in line with that. So yeah, I see where you're coming from. Yeah.
Okay, thank you all very much. We're upholding the decision of the planners on this occasion. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that the local review body have agreed to uphold the decision of the appointed officer and refuse the planning permission for the same grounds as detailed in the papers.
Thank you, Claire. Right, we move to item 5, refusal of planning permission for erection of extension to rear of dwelling house at 25 Royal Avenue, Stranraer. Planning reference number 17/0393/FUL. Claire, you want to take us through the procedure again, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Again, you've got your notice of review, report of handling, your observation of the appointed officer, planning application form, decision notice, the relevant extracts from the local development plan, photos of the application site locality. The grounds of refusal are on page 254 of your papers, being the massing, scale and design of the extension fails to preserve or enhance the scale and character of the existing dwelling house and would be contrary to the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan Policy H8 and supplementary guidance, alterations and extensions to houses. The requested method of determination is on page 218, being the applicant has requested that the review be dealt with on the basis of these review documents only, with no further procedure. The grounds stated in the notice of review are, in summary, no consideration or regard has been made to the high boundary treatment enclosing the rear yard bounded by Morrison's on two sides by means of a 2.3 metre high walls and a 1.8 high coniferous hedge in between. There has been no consideration given to the principal elevation on Royal Avenue, as none of the proposal to the rear can be seen and does not extend past the side elevation, as well being lower in height than the apex of the existing dwelling roof. All shadows would be cast by the extension are within the applicant's own property. The case officer sought design amendments to construct the proposal using permitted development lines, rights and detaching part of the proposal, but this would result in an inferior cluster with no direct internal link to the blood bike and proposed put room. The application has not been dealt with consistently or fairly in comparison to others and should be approved. You have further comments by interested parties, being the comments of the appointed officer. You also have the relevant development plan policies. So the main issue for the LRB to consider are, does the proposal conform with the relevant development plan policies, and critically, does it comply with local development plan policies OP1, OP2 and H8 and supplementary guidance, alterations and extensions to houses? Specifically, does the massing, scale and design of the proposed extension preserve or enhance the scale and character of the existing dwelling house? And if not, are there any material considerations which would indicate that planning permission should be granted as an exception to policy? So again, having outlined the documents in your papers, it's for the LRB to firstly consider whether it has sufficient information to consider the review today. You have the same further procedures as outlined for the previous item, and the members are clear and no further clarification is required. I'll ask the Chairman in the first instance to lead you through the papers for this item.
Right, thanks very much, Claire. You want to change the procedure this time? I'll show you the photographs first, instead of keeping it secret.
Thank you, Chair. For the avoidance of doubt, these are the same as the photographs as they appear in the papers from pages 275 to 281. This is a view, it's looking from Royal Avenue to the front elevation of the property, and you can see the Morrison's supermarket building just in behind here, but we'll come on to that. This is a view showing the present rear elevation of the property, so it's not been extended at all at the moment. It's semi-detached just now, so you can see the boundary hedge on the left-hand side there and the large patio area. This is a view from within the rear curtilage looking west, so away from the house. So you can see they've got an outbuilding in their garden area there. You've got some conifers growing, and then you've got the quite high wall at the moment that's mentioned in the applicant's submission. Beyond that, you've got the Morrison's supermarket. And that's looking slightly further around towards the west and the car parking area. So that's looking at the mutual boundary with the semi-detached property to the north, which has also got an outbuilding in its rear garden area. That's looking towards the common boundary. You'll notice there's a small extension visible there, flat roofed extension. This is showing the wider context of the site. So the wall you saw previously, this is the opposite side of that wall. So you're looking from the car parking area at Morrison's, and this is looking pretty much due north. You can see the Northwest Castle Hotel building on the left-hand side there, and the subject property in the middle ground on the right. So the rear garden area is as bounded by that wall. And as you move round, you can see it just returning there at the corner. So both sides of that boundary, quite a high wall there, which bounds onto the Morrison's car parking area. And that shows it as well. That's looking more towards the east.
Great, thank you very much. Right, can we now move to item 5, the notice of review, pages 217 to 223. And any questions? No questions. Move to report on handling, page 225 to page 234. Councillor Maitland.
Forgive me, Chairman. Sorry, I am dipping backwards again. I'm sorry about this. Page 221. The statement setting out reasons for review on page 221, in the middle, talks about no consideration has been given to the location and boundary treatments. Now, obviously, we don't absolutely know what the agent was getting at here, but I thought, actually, that there have been boundary treatments. Are there any issues here that have not been thought through with respect to boundary treatments, other than the issue of the building on the boundary or a metre away from the boundary, and I suppose the issue of the 45-degree rule? But I don't absolutely know what is being suggested there, unless there's something obvious that I've missed that I ought to know about through the policies about.
I think clarity on the 45-degree rule would be helpful as well, because I've been wondering what that was as well.
Oh, that's.
We build out for a building, you want to be 90 degrees, not 45, but we'll leave it to Robert.
The 45-degree rule, if you like, is a test of daylight and impact on amenity of adjacent properties. So the way you do it is, it's like an early warning test. So if you conduct this and it fails, you have to do a more stringent test to assess something's impact on neighbouring daylighting. If it passes the test, you can be satisfied that there won't be a daylighting impact, because it is, it is an early warning, if you like, that there might be an issue. And basically how it works is, if you've got a plan of an extension, say, and you have it in a plan format, so a floor plan, for example, and you draw a 45-degree angle from that, and say you've got a window of a habitable room, a bedroom or a living room or something at the adjacent property, if more than half of that window is obscured by your 45-degree angle, if you shade in the kind of cone that's being created, the triangle, if you do it in one direction and then you do the same thing but in an elevational format, so when you look at an elevational plan, you draw a 45-degree angle from the eaves level as well, if that is also covering more than half of the window of the habitable room, then you've potentially got a problem with daylighting. It has to fail in both directions, both elevational and plan form. If it doesn't fail in both of those, then you know that you're okay in terms of daylight and impact, and there won't be, there might be an impact on residential amenity, but not a significant impact that would justify a refusal of a planning application. The thing with the rear boundary treatment, it's obviously been taken into account by the appointed officer. The appointed officer's been out and done a site visit. It's the appointed officer's photographs that I'm relying on. So, the officer that's done the report has been and seen and witnessed those walls and boundary treatments in place, so it clearly has been taken into account as part of the decision. No doubt about that. What I think the applicant's agent is alluding to is you've got high walls there, you've got 2.3 metre high walls on two sides, you've got 1.8 metre high conifer hedge on the other side, it's round at the rear, you're not going to see it from the front of Royal Avenue, it's really going to have very little visual impact. So what's the big problem, I think, is what he's alluding to, because you've got a very private, if you like, well-screened rear garden area as it exists at the moment. So I think that's what the allusion to the boundary treatment is. And it's a plea that you take account of those special circumstances when you make the decision today. So it's an almost, if you like, you can't really see much of it type plea.
Thank you, Chairman. That's fine. That's helpful.
Anybody else, any questions? Report on handling. 223 to 234. I think 4.4, when it talks about the footprint of the extension, it's almost as big as the house. The house is, say, approximately 80 square metres, and the approximate footprint of the elevation is 72, sorry. Anybody, any comments? No? Part 3. You want to comment? Sorry, Councillor James.
Could I just have a little more explanation about what is and massing and scale? What is massing and scale, and how should we take that into account?
If I was explaining it, massing is, if you like, if you're looking at buildings and constructions, massing is the arrangement of volumes and shapes in a building. So it's like how the three-dimensional bulk of a building is put together. So scale is something different, and I'll come on to that. But massing is how that works. It's like proportion, if you like. And, you know, for example, a building may have too much massing if the gable depth is too great because it changes the proportions of it. Then the massing of the building becomes wrong. It's really a three-dimensional concept that relates to volume and so on. So, you know, you might have in a street scene, you might have a similarity of massing, you know, in terms of height and volume and proportion. But that's really what that's driving at. Scale, the best way I can explain scale is like if you imagine a hierarchy of buildings, you might have something like a bank, for example. Maybe not so much in this day and age, but certainly in the past. Your bank building would be quite large. It would have quite large windows, high ceilings, large doorways and so on. You might get something domestic that's got a much smaller proportion to it. The best way to describe something that is out of scale would be to use an example of a train set, you know, and you've maybe got two locomotives, and one's at one scale, another one's at another scale, and it's the same locomotive, but one's at a completely different scale to the other and looks completely out of kilter. It's the same kind of analogy when you're talking about scale with buildings. You know, if you had the same building and the same proportions, but the scale was different, it just wouldn't sit easily with everything else. The scale would be wrong. So that, I don't know if that makes much sense, but that's how I would describe it.
Okay, Councillor James. Okay, I'll let you consider it. We'll move on to Part 3, observation of the appointed officer on the agent's notice of review, page 237 to page 238, sorry. I think paragraph 5 might kind of answer your query, Councillor James. Applicant states the appointed officer has refused the application on the grounds it's too big, and states that none of the proposal is built on a shared boundary and the proposal would be over a metre away from any boundary and does not break the 45-degree rule. Reference is made to paragraphs 4.4, 4.6 of the report on handling and paragraph 4 above. They don't see it as too big, obviously. It's the scale and proportion to the existing building that are attaching it to. It's almost doubling the size of it.
Probably something I should have mentioned relative to scale as well. It's often used in relation to footprint size relative to an original building too. So when you're looking at the scale of an extension, it's not necessarily all about proportions relative to the original building. There is a size element relative to the original building too, in terms of footprint size.
Is it at all important how it scales or masses to the original building, or is it more important how it fits into the surrounding buildings? Or
I would say how it fits into the surrounding buildings, but I'll ask the planner, see what his view is.
You've got a policy, the policy and supplementary guidance, policy 88 covers alterations and extensions to houses. And we've reproduced that in the papers. I'm trying to actually find whereabouts it is. 263, thank you. Yes, just at the foot of that page, 263, policy 88. So it sets out the requirements. So it is supporting alterations and extensions to dwelling houses, provided that the massing, scale, design and external materials are both sympathetic to the scale and character of the existing dwelling house and its immediate neighbourhood. So they're both, I would say, equally important. It depends on the case though. In a case like this, you've got the applicant's agent has made the point that there are quite tall boundary treatments at this location, so they're arguing that the impact in the immediate neighbourhood is less as a result. So in this case, it's possibly more about impact and scale and character of the existing dwelling and how significant you feel that is.
yeah, I was just thinking it can only be important to compare it with the surrounding buildings, because a building could be expanded once and then it comes back again and it gets expanded based on its new footprint, and then in the meantime you've added maybe some permitted developments and that scales it up again. I don't see how that's workable to consider the size of it now and the next iteration of its expansion, but I can see how it should fit into the neighbourhood. I know, just hit on that idea now, I'm excited, yeah.
Kind of reiterate what Councillor James is saying. I looked at this before, and as a layman, not in the planning department, I'm thinking to myself, what's it in keeping with Morrison's? When you're looking at it, it's when I'm looking at this photograph now, it's not really, to me, detracting from anything, And also, I'm a bit concerned because obviously it's a blood bike service that we're talking about here. The guy's storing stuff here, and it's a vital. Well, it's became a very vital service in Dumfries and Galloway. So, are we looking at reviewing that? So, if he scales back the actual application, and then has an adjacent place where he can keep his motorcycle and his equipment.
I think that is mentioned in the application actually from the planning officer, that they could, the development, if they take out, they could do the bike development separately on permitted development if they reduced the size of the proposal in this application. I think that's correct. Robert, is it?
Yes, Chair. The difficulty with the blood bike thing, it's probably a charity we'd all wish to support, but the difficulty in this case is that we've got to treat this as an extension to a house. It could be sold in the open market next week to someone who hasn't got anything to do with that blood bike scheme. So I just, caution placing too much emphasis on that. There's a reason, if you think the development's acceptable in its own right, that's fine, but I wouldn't rely on the fact, it's part of the blood bike scheme too much, because there's really very little way of tying that down, and I think it would be unreasonable to tie any decision down to the fact that the occupier happens to be involved in the blood bike scheme.
I see where you're coming from that, yeah, and absolutely, I did read into that, so I do see where it says all that, yeah, but clearly, it's just a concern. I'm not reading too much into it, but it does somewhat alarm me, that we might be preventing this service from having somewhere to store their equipment. Thank you.
I think you've got to watch out for, sometimes you get applications with quite sensitive things in them, and you say, oh God, I've got to support that, but according to planning regulations, it's not supportable. And that's really where we are. But I appreciate where you're coming from. You're not the first and you'll be the last. Anybody else, any questions? Item 4, page 239, planning application form, to page 251.
No, maybe just, Chairman, did anybody think that the car on page 249 was curiously small? Just thought it was a teeny weeny little car. Not think?
Hopefully it's all in proportion, Jane.
Chair, I was going to say that's actually a great example of something that's totally out of scale. if you look at it, and if you look at the person at the bottom as well, I'm fairly sure that person's out of scale with the dwelling house, but that car is completely out of scale with that dwelling house. So that is a great example of what I was trying to say with scale. If it was expanded a wee bit, it would be in scale, but that's out of scale at the moment.
Anybody, any comments, questions? Okay. Decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council, page 251 to page 258. Okay, section 6, page 259 to page 274, that's the local development plan. And 7, page 275 onwards, that's the photographs of the site. Up to page 282. Are there any questions in that section?
No questions, Chairman.
No questions. Councillor Hislop? No. Councillor James? Councillor Fairbairn? No. Do you consider that you've got sufficient information in front of you to make a decision? Okay, thank you. Any further points you want to raise, questions you want to ask? Councillor Maitland?
It's really, I think, I mean, what we've got to look at with this one is to think about the effect on the adjoining property. I think, I mean, the rest of it, I take their point that it's not visible from the front, and behind you, you have got a supermarket, and frankly, on that basis, I would say to myself, well, why not? But on the other hand, if you then do look at this with respect to the size of the next door building and the length of it, I think it could be oppressive. Actually, I do, and I know that there is. If you look at the ridge heights, Chairman, I know that the extension ridge height is a little lower than the original one, but nevertheless, I think there will be a sense of being oppressed by a large piece of building next door, which arguably could be reduced. We've seen that in here, and broken up with a shed and a boot place separately, which would not give you quite such an oppressive feeling. So I must confess that's the way that I'm going at this stage. Because actually there's nothing really wrong with it, except I think for the fact that it is so close to a neighbouring property.
I think you're right, and the suggestion has been made if they take the garage out of it, they can build it separately, without need for planning permission. But when you see the back proposed south elevation on page 249, aye, it just shows you the scale in comparison to next door. Anybody else want to comment? Councillor Fairbairn?
Yeah, I'm a bit confused, to be quite honest with you, because I mean, even if they scale it back, they're still going to have an extension at the back, correct? So you're still going to be oppressive. What other way are they going to build? So I'm trying to get my head around this, looking at it. It might have been a good idea if we maybe got something from next door as well.
If you go to page 249, see the drawings on page 249, the top drawing, the proposed south elevation.
So what?
On the left hand.
What I'm trying to get my head around is how are we going to build, how are we going to modify it in any way or form if it's going to get passed?
Well, it's got to be built more in keeping with the extension on the next property next door, I would suggest. But Robert might like to comment on that.
Yes, just for the avoidance of doubt, Chair, when you look at the elevations on page 249, the proposed south elevation is the one, if you like, the internal elevation to this property. So you've got the garage returning within, it's almost like a courtyard to the rear of the existing property where it's presently open. When you look at the proposed north elevation, that is the elevation to the neighbouring property, the semi-detached property. And when you look at the proposed west elevation, that is how it would look. So there is a gap to the common boundary there, which is shown with the hedge line. And then you've got that return, which is shown the kind of garage storage area. I think it is as well. You've also got on page 247 on the previous page, you've got the floor plan as well. So it's an L-shaped extension that's proposed here. And there is a setback from the boundary there too. What I would say to the members is if you're minded to refuse the application on the basis of it being oppressive to the neighbour, you would actually be varying the decision that was taken. So you're changing the grounds for refusal if you're minded to go down that line, because the appointed officer's reasons for refusal are as given on page 254. So that's all relative to the scale and character of the existing dwelling house. It's not based on the amenity impact on the adjacent dwelling house.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Hislop?
Chair, I have some concerns with the fact that another option is that you delete the boot room and bike store, put up slightly smaller hip roof, and what could they build with development rights there? Could they stick up something with a great big gable and we have no control over it? Because that's what we're sort of saying, that if you have the two buildings separate, you can do it. So you could actually end up with a worse solution than what's being proposed here, because you could have your extension to your house with a hip roof and then have slap bang up against the boundary fence a huge gable with the same size. Now, I know it's not in the papers, but is that a consideration that, you know, I would rather have something better than something potentially worse.
Right, what is permitted development, Robert?
Permitted development, if you look at page 232 of your papers, there's an email from the case officer Tracy Carnegie to the agent Clark Preston on this issue, and she was providing Mr. Preston with advice to consider removing the bike store boot room element from the proposal and to reduce the length of the rear projection. So that was reducing the utility room and bathroom by approximately 1 metre to 5.8 metres projection, and then detaching the proposed bike store and boot room. As I understand, there's a height limitation of 4 metres if it's a detached building to the rear in the curtilage. But if it is detached, then it becomes a case of how much of that cartilage is taken up, and I think the limitation now is 50% in combination with extensions. But you know, I couldn't actually say for sure without having the permitted development rights in front of me what you could do with that, but it does give you a certain amount of latitude. You could potentially tear out building, have a 4-metre high gable in that situation. But what I would say is obviously what you've got under consideration is what has been considered and what's been decided by the appointed officer in terms of the planning application. And that's what's in front of you for review today.
Okay. Any more comments? You think we should agree with the appointed officer, Jane? You think we should agree with the appointed officer?
Well, I've sort of looking and visualising in page 248. I mean, if taking this absolutely face value and not going a what if, like Councillor Hislop is going, although I can quite understand where he's going on it. I think that the proposed north elevation is very long and very big in comparison to the original house. I mean, it is basically doubling that size. But I think I'll tail off at that point and see what any other member wants to say.
As I understand it, like it or not, extensions can't be huge compared to the existing building. So I think I'm probably bound by that advice, whatever I think about it.
Can I be absolutely clear? What is the policy? I mean, I read it, but I can't remember what it says in terms of it's not to overwhelm the original building, but is it specific? I mean, does it talk about proportions and sizes in terms of, you know, an extension should not be more than X percentage of the original dwelling or building?
Just for the avoidance of doubt, Chair, we've got quite involved guidance, the supplementary guidance on alterations and extensions to houses, and that starts on page 263 of the papers and goes up to 274. But no, there isn't a particular percentage. There's nothing that says, well, a 30% extension is okay, a 40% extension isn't. You know, there's nothing like a numerical standard. What it does say when you look at 2.0 on page 265, general design principles, amongst other things, it says that, I'm trying to think what it is, it should not result in overdevelopment of the plot and retain a serviceable area of private garden space. So it does have that part on it. And the first bullet point, it says normally be smaller than the existing building and should be so arranged not to intrude on the main frontage. So it all requires judgment. You've got policy H8 embedded within that guidance in page 265 as a reference point. So really today, you're looking at, you know, do you feel that the proposal contravenes that policy? And if so, you've got to look at, you know, do you feel there are other material considerations which enable you to overturn policy or make it an exception to policy and grant it for other reasons?
Chair, I'm maybe out of line with the rest of the folk, but I don't actually mind this scaling and mass of the building compared to the original building, but I do have a concern that you're overdeveloping the site. I think, you know, if it had a bigger garden, you know, somewhere further round about either side of it, I would have no problem with this. But the fact that it actually fills most of the rear garden is my concern, but I don't know if that fits in with the same conditions for reasons for refusal as compared to the building. I think the fact that the roof's slightly lower, I mean, according to the plans, and you've got hip roofs which bring it in smaller again, I'm quite okay with. But the fact that I think it's an overdevelopment of the actual site rather than out of keeping with what's already there. But I don't know if that can be changed or anything like that, or whether it needs to be changed or it still fits in the same condition, reason for refusal.
Chair, I was going to say, if it helps members at all, you can, of course, vary a decision that's been taken by the appointed officer. For example, if you feel the application should be refused, but you don't agree with the grounds that have been provided, you're, of course, at liberty to change the grounds if you think it should be refused. Your other options, of course, are to uphold the appointed officer's decision or to just overturn the appointed officer's decision and grant permission. But you can vary a decision if you feel it should be refused planning permission, but on entirely different grounds, you're at liberty to do so, absolutely.
Do we have any norms or policies regarding the overdevelopment of a site, how big the footprint of a building can be in relation to its parcel size?
I suppose what you're looking for is a policy that you can tie it to get away with a...
Yeah, are you a norm, or a practice, a guideline, or a policy where we to compare it with?
The guidance is in the papers. You know, you're looking at policy H8 of the LDP, and you're looking at the supplementary guidance document, alterations and extensions to houses. That's what a case officer would look at and follow when they were making a decision on a case. So that's pages 263 up to 274.
It's on page 271, really, overdevelopment of the plot. It's just sort of giving us a little bit of help, I think, on that.
You've also got on page 268, it has something on rear extensions as well. And if you look at paragraph 3.12, it says rear extensions, either single or two-storey, should not normally exceed 4 metres in depth. It's not an absolute, though. It just says should not normally. It's more a kind of rough guideline than anything else. But there's no absolute standard. It is really a judgment call. But that's where the key guidance is in assessing a case.
In the case of a new build, I know this may not seem entirely relevant, but in the case of a new build, is there any guidelines how much amenity space there would be or garden area there should be if it was a virgin plot and they were building on it? Do we have any norms, policies, etc., guides on that? Yeah.
Density standards, usually new houses have at least 100 square metres rear garden space, and window to window, well, from the rear elevation of a house to rear boundary, you normally build in a new developments now 9 metres, so that you're building in 18 metres between the elevations. That's not normally the kind of standard for new build residential developments.
Yeah, sorry, I just can't see the plan well enough to know how much garden amenity space there is left.
100 square metres. No.
Chair, if it's any help, I've just got one of the original plans here. Now, looking at the dimensions, the rear garden area is approximately 12.5 metres in depth, and in width it is looking about 10 metres. So on that basis, I would say the rear garden area, if you like, to the rear of the building line of the house as it exists, is about 120 square metres just now.
Well, I think bearing in mind what members are saying, and having looked, I mean, I think we've swithered over this one on the basis that we can see why it was desirable, etc. But on the other hand, I think members have come to the feeling that with the size of the garden and the amount of garden that would be covered over by this extra building, I think probably my feeling is that we should probably go with the current recommendation and proposal and decision by the officer. But I can see it's a difficult one.
Councillor Hislop?
Chair, I don't fully agree with that, because of the fact I know of one house where I would say it was a poultice that was stuck onto the back of it, similar. It was a hipped roof house, and it was a story and a half put on the back about the same length, and it was granted planning permission.
Councillor
I
Hislop?
don't think it met in.
You've been here long enough to know that each case is taken on its merits, and it's this case here you're talking about, not the one you're dreaming about.
And what I'm saying is the fact that I don't think it is against point 1 of policy H8. However, the second bullet point is where I think it doesn't meet the criteria. I think the proposal would result in the overdevelopment of the plot without sufficient space remaining for garden ground, and I think it should be refused on that ground rather than on the massing scale, design and external appearance.
Quite happy to go, Councillor Maitland?
I'm perfectly happy to acknowledge the logic of what Councillor Hislop is saying, so I'm very happy to go along with that.
You got a note of what Councillor Hislop said, Claire? Just testing.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Chairman. If I've got Councillor Hislop correct, he's proposing that the LRB vary the decision of the appointed officer and refuse the planning permission as it's contrary to policy H8, alterations and extensions to houses, in that the proposal would result in overdevelopment of the plot and there would not be sufficient space remaining for garden ground.
Okay.
Sorry, it was just one question. It was during discussion, there was some commentary about the extension being oppressive to the neighbour as well. Is that not part of the decision? I just wanted to just clarify that for the avoidance of doubt.
I don't think so, because I think that's dealt with respect to the overdevelopment. So leave that at that.
Sorry, I'll need to do it again. Notice of a refusal of planning permission for erection of dwelling house at rear of 20 St John Street, CREETOWN. Planning reference number 16/1403/FUL. Claire, please.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Again, you've got your key documents being the notice of review and related documents, report on handling, observation of the appointed officer, planning application form and supporting documents, decision notice, relevant extracts from LDP and photos of the application site and locality. The grounds of refusal are, in this case, on page 352, being the proposal is contrary to Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan Policy IN7, Flooding and Development, and Scottish Planning Policy, in that it has not been demonstrated that the development would not lead to an unacceptable flood risk. The requested method of determination on page 290 is that the applicant has requested that the review be dealt with on the basis of further written submissions. The grounds stated in the notice of review are, in summary, the applicant disagrees with the evidence provided on this decision in relation to flooding. There has been no record of flooding in the last 40 years. There is also a camber on the road veering to the opposite side of the proposed site. The site has had permission previously which expired. Nothing has changed on the street since. Stated depths of water in the report are not accurate, as cars were still able to drive through the surface water at the time of said flood. Foot access is also available to St John Street. We have the further comments of interested parties, being the comments of the roads planning team leader, comments of the flood risk management team, comments of STIPA, and the comments of the appointed officer. You also again have the relevant development plan policies. So the main issues for the local review body to consider are: does the proposal conform with relevant development plan policies? Critically, does it comply with LDP policy IN7 and supplementary guidance, flooding and development? Is it accepted that the development accords with the local development plan policy in all other respects? And if the proposal is not considered to comply with the terms of the development plan and policy IN7 and supplementary planning guidance, flooding and development, are there any material considerations which would indicate that planning permission should be granted as an exception to policy? And what weight, if any, does the LRB wish to give to the fact that the planning permission, now expired, was previously granted subject to conditions for the erection of a dwelling house on the site, the reference being 07P20199. So again, having outlined the documents within your papers, it falls to the LRB to firstly consider whether it has sufficient information to consider this review. Again, you have the same further procedures available as outlined at the start of the meeting. And if members are clear and no further clarification is required, I'll ask the chairman to lead you through the papers for this item.
Right, thank you, Claire. Take us through the photographs, Robert, please.
This is a view from Silver Street in CREETOWN looking to the north, and the application site is on the right hand side in this picture. Now the location plan as your reference for this one, should bear with me, is on page 335. So you can see, just if you turn your papers 90 degrees into landscape format, you'll see the application site as a grey shaded broad rectangle in the top left hand corner of the location plan. That's one to scale of 1 to 2,500. Pink, sorry, I've got the black and white version. Your little pink square denotes the application site.
You might have different colours, Robert.
This is from Silver Street again. It's looking east directly at the application site, so very much a gap site, and you're looking up here towards St John Street itself. So a gap site, if you like. This is looking south with the application site on the left hand side. You can see it's overgrown character at the moment. And this is from Silver Street looking south with the application site on the left hand side. The view taken looking west. This is from the rear of the application site itself. So this is looking towards Silver Street and the houses on it. And this is looking southwest, taken from the middle of the application site, so it gives you an idea of its character. And looking northwest from the middle of the application site onto the properties on Silver Street just now. Sorry, the river is to the south of this site in CREETOWN, probably about 200 or 300 metres to the south. You can see it on the location plan. You can see the Bannockburn denoted there. Yes, and then to the west you've got the river that runs to the marshland, just next to the 75. Yeah. The River Cree itself as well to the west, if that's the river you're asking about.
It was the one that's causes the flooding.
Yeah. I think I'll be able to check that in the Constitution as well.
Sorry, page 285 to page 292. Any comments? Is Councillor Hislop away for a break?
No, that's all.
Sorry? Oh, are we Corey?
Yeah.
See, this is something I think is we're doing something wrong here, where Should it not be 7 appointees to this committee, allowing for 2 to drop out? No?
No. No.
That must have her shaking her head, days, I better watch what I'm saying.
No, quorum, I can confirm, is, well, you've got a membership of a panel of 5 and quorum is 3.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll continue on that basis. Any questions in the first section? Right, the report on handling, page 295 to page 306. There's an internal memo on page 301 where it states there was a previous full planning permission under 07P/2/0199. Given that's 10 years ago and conditions have changed since then, I think that's something that we should ignore.
And we
Councillor
don't know whether it was with recommendation or against recommendation. We don't know that.
I would assume that, Robert. You know, I looked into that 07 application.
The 07 application was granted permission, but it has now expired. Just to come back to the earlier question about the source of the flood risk, I wasn't sure about that one at the time. Your best reference, you will come on to this, is the SEPA response on page 307. If you look at point 1.1 there, it says the site is adjacent to the 1 in 200 year fluvial extent of the Moneypenny Burn and is partially within the 1 in 200 year coastal extent of the Solway Firth. So it's a double effect, if you like. When it says the Solway Firth, it's, you're talking Bigtown Bay, the Crete estuary, basically at this location. So that is, if you like, the source of the flood risk at this location, and it's a predicted 1 in 200 year flood event in both cases combined.
Let's continue consider the letter from SEPA, if you like, as well. 307. Page 319. Councillor Maitland, sorry.
Well, yes, please. From what I really am getting with this, SEPA actually doesn't really seem to mind too much as long as we lift up the levels, the finished level of the building. The point really is that the council thinks that there isn't safe access if there was to be the need to get emergency vehicles or anything similar into the property during a flooding incident. That is that. I mean, really, I'm really checking that is the real issue. And SEPA thinks it's all right because they are only concerned with it being, with the actual building being above the flooding risk. But the council has to think carefully as to whether or not the access is good enough and there is any sort of danger or difficulty. That's right, is it? To that?
That's the way I'm reading it. The crux of the issue as I'm reading the case is, if you look at page 323, the appointed officer's comments, and the third point there, so it's the bottom paragraph on that page, that seems to be the key issue in the reason for refusal. And it is very much based on the access and whether or not, in this case, the appointed officer says that that would not provide sufficient equivalent emergency access or egress to the site because it's not vehicular.
Sorry about that. It does say it in paragraph 3 on page 323. It does say, although SEPA did not object to the application, they did state it was for Dumfries and Galloway Council as flood prevention authority to determine if vehicular access and egress arrangements for the site were acceptable. Furthermore, this pedestrian access is currently in different ownership to the application site, and therefore the future use of the access is not guaranteed.
Is there something direct from the, sorry, is there something direct from the roads department in here that we can read? Has anyone seen anything?
They'll have been consulted, I would expect.
Yes, the comments of the roads planning team leader are on pages 301 to 302 in this case.
May I ask a question with respect to access? I'm quite curious. I thought that when we were building a house, we had to make certain that you could leave the parking in forward gear. Is that or because there are two parking spaces? But I suppose the explanation could be that you could reverse into those parking spaces. Would that be the logic? So you could then come out of it in forward gear. I've answered my own question. Thank you very much.
I know we gave planning permission to flats down the Vennel. Now, as you know, they are in the floodplain there, but they had to provide access egress during the flood time without having to go into the water. So it meant building stairs up and through into the next building and that type of thing. So there's that aspect as well. It didn't consider the use of cars or anything.
No questions.
You come over here and work a switch for me. Planning permission 07/P/2/0199 for the erection of a dwelling house in the same site was granted in July 2007, but flood risk did not form part of the assessment for that application. In the subsequent 10 years, local and national planning policy on flood risk has changed significantly. So that's something that we've got to take into consideration. Okay. Councillor James, you look kind of...
I'm going to ask a question at some stage. I don't know if this is an appropriate point, but if, let's say I hypothetically took the view that there are plenty of other houses here and I didn't think there was going to be really significant flooding, and I thought, well, you know, they can take the risk if they want to build a house there, would that be grounds for me, or could that be suitable grounds that I would say, yes, I would like to approve this, because it's infill, and I don't think the flooding is a big deal.
You could, if you felt, you could take that as an exception to policy. If you felt you had enough grounds to depart from policy, your own policy, then yes, you could do that, as long as you've got a set of reasons, such as you've explained out as to why you're departing from policy. I think that's completely legitimate, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my head around these photographs here with it, because obviously they've said to them from an emergency point of view, the neighbour's going to give them access, they can get out, escape from that particular area if it floods, which it seems it's not going to do, according to all the reports here. So I'm just trying to get my head around it all, you know, 1 in 200 years. I mean, it's quite evident that SEPA are saying it's not going to flood. We're quite happy. They seem to have complied with all the regulations that you've set upon them, builder-wise. I don't understand your refusal on how to get out of the house if it floods next the adjacent property next door. That is an escape route for them. Can we see that? I'm trying to look through the photographs here to see if I can. 347, is it? We're looking at here. Be good if we could see the gate.
Sorry, Chair, in relation to the siting of the house, you've got a scale plan of 1 to 200, or site plan rather, to a scale of 1 to 200, and that's page 335. So that shows the positioning of the proposed house within the application site. So setback round about 6.8 metres from the front of the site onto Silver Street. And then you have the elevations and the floor plans showing a single storey house on page 337. In terms of finished floor level, if you return to your site plan, on page 335, finished floor level of 6.42. Now that's relative to ordnance datum, and as a means of comparison, it's giving the ordnance datum for various name points within the site. So the closest to the edge of the road, from what I can see, is looking like C, which is 5.93. So what they're saying is approximately the finished floor level of that single storey house will be roughly half a metre above the level as it exists at the edge of Silver Street at the moment. I don't know if that's helpful or not. Looking at the appointed officer comments, it seems clear to me the reason for refusal is based on the advice provided in consultation by the Council's flood risk management team. It's them that have flagged up the issue with the access in the flood risk and the predicted 1 in 200 year flood risk event, and that's very much the basis for the refusal, the advice that's been provided there.
Have we done the observation of the appointed officer? Did we do that? Item 3, item 4 is planning application form. Page, 326 to 346. And that covers pre-application inquiry, erection of a dwelling house at 22 St John Street, CREETOWN.
Yes, perhaps you can help me with the block plan 339. Is there a height given anywhere here which would be the 1 in 200 year anticipated flood level? Because I know that SEPA said that the freeboard has got to be 600 mil above flood level, and well, is it 600 mil above flood level in this, or is there any indication? Because it would be much easier for me to judge whether this is severe flooding risk or nominal.
Chair, if it's helpful, what I'm looking at is the advice received from SEPA. So looking at the consultation response, particularly on page 308 of the papers. So if you look at paragraph 1.2, it says the approximate 1 in 200 year water level for the area is 6.23 metres above ordnance datum. So that is the level that they are arriving at, and that's a prediction, obviously, 6.23.
And the finished floor level is 6.5.
Yeah, and you're looking at, the levels there when it says at the bottom of the block plan on page 339, you've got various points A to J that then relate to various ordnance datum levels or levels above ordnance datum. So the two correlate, so you can tell basically on that block plan, if the point is above 6.23, it's above the anticipated 1 in 200 year inundation.
Sorry, Rob, you're much better at plans than I. Could you tell me what the indicated freeboard height is here? Is it 6.5, is it, did you say?
So, sorry, 6.42.
Sorry, would that be indicated freeboard height on the plan that's been submitted?
Yes, okay, if I look back a couple of pages, they've got 6.42. So then I look at the block plan, and in the 200-year event, then one would step down 20 centimetres or so to get to the water, is that right? And then the access road level, Councillor Maitland, do you have that at hand? I'm just trying to get a feel for how bad the flooding is to be predicted and whether that's reasonable risk or not. I can't really get it without actually seeing the topography or understanding the topography.
If it helps, looking at the block plan on page 338, there seems to be a point D. If you see where Silver Street's annotated in the bottom plan, just to the right of that, I think it's a D next to that asterisk, which would kind of make sense because that's indicating it's 5.98. So that would be broadly the level of Silver Street there. 5.98 metres above ordnance datum. So when you compare that with what SEPA are predicting as inundation of 6.23 above ordnance datum in the 1 in 200-year flood event, that would suggest they expect Silver Street to be inundated to the tune of 25 centimetres.
At the point where the house is, or maybe there's a worse point, but
as you pointed out, the house would be sitting above the inundation level.
yeah, I think of the access road now a little bit. I was just trying to understand. Has this house got decent access in a major flood event? And from what little I can see at the moment, it probably has, because the water level wouldn't be so high. But we don't have all the information about the road, its topography as it runs along.
Certainly in the pictures it looked fairly level where it was going by the site. Councillor Fairbairn.
Thank you, Chair. Right, trying to get my head around this, okay? So we're saying that we're ignoring what SEPA's got to say and we're going to go with the team leader on flood risk management. We've taken advice from a professional organisation. They say they've really not got any objections, but we're saying now that they can't have this build because they can't escape in the times of 1 in 200-year flood event. Is that what we're basing it on?
Well, my reading of it is the case officer's been dealing with the case, and because of its location relative to an expected 1 in 200-year flood risk area, they've consulted both SEPA and the Council's own flood risk management team. You can see in pages, well, it's basically all on page 306 of the papers, the Council's flood risk management team's response to that. So you've got a series of bullet points, and it's the fifth bullet point, which is the basis for the refusal. So when you look at that bullet point, which is a consultation response, so that's internal advice on flooding, and then you actually look at the delegated report, which is the report on handling, which is the conclusion of which is on page 299. So if you look at paragraph 4.8, it becomes clear to me that that is the issue that then breaches policy IN7 of the LDP. It's the development would not lead to an unacceptable flood risk. Sorry, it's not been demonstrated that the development would not lead to an unacceptable flood risk. So the flood risk assessment's not been done for this case. And that safe vehicular site access egress can be achieved to the site during a 1 in 200-year flood event. So neither of these things has been demonstrated. And it's considered the risk to human health and safety, occupiers of the house and the safety of emergency staff is not acceptable. So that's the reason for the refusal. It's basically going to be technical advice that's been provided in this case.
Sorry, so we're saying historically, we're going back in the record, saying in 2011 there was some instance that they're making reference to the flood team. Do we know what that was and how significant it was?
Indicative, for the avoidance of doubt, the indicative flood maps are those held by SEPA that try and model the level of flood risk. It's a fairly blunt instrument, but it does give you some indication. It's more like an early warning system, and you have to then consult with the relevant bodies who will look at a detailed proposal in a lot more detail. So that's what that is. When it says indicative flood maps, it's, you know, what SEPA produce that assists with that.
Councillor James?
Yes, on 299, it says in that it is not being demonstrated. Does that mean that the onus is on the proposer to demonstrate that, probably by means of a flood risk assessment? Is that a critical point?
Robert?
Yes, there's a series of correspondence you can see which is related to the case officer's assessment. So if you look at the correspondence of pages 315 to 318 and 319, you'll see that there's been a correspondence there. The email from case officer Mary Mitchell on page 316 is quite key in the sense that a flood risk assessment prepared by a suitably qualified professional has been asked for in this case. And Mary also recommends to the agent that SEPA and the Council's flood risk management team should be consulted as well in that regard. As far as I'm aware, I haven't looked at the application, they never submitted a flood risk assessment for this case, and that might have made the difference. There's also a letter on the 15th of November 2016 on page 311 which is asking for the same thing too. So that, you know, a detailed study may have made the difference in this case, but in the absence of that information, a precautionary principle has been taken. So when it says it has not been demonstrated, you know, to me that's saying that the flood risk assessment that's been asked for hasn't been submitted.
Councillor Maitland? Well, just a second. Do you consider we've got sufficient information to make a decision? Councillor Fairbairn? I don't think, have we any detail on that flood at all, Robert? No.
Just quickly have a look through the information again. When it sorry, Chair, whereabouts does it mention the 2011 flood event?
That's a good question.
I'm afraid that, thanks for that clarification. I'm afraid that looking at the appointed officers' further comments in page 323, so the first paragraph, it does mention who has confirmed, you know, that the flood risk management team have confirmed the flooding occurred in that area in 2011. I don't have any further detail on that at all. I mean, if you members feel that you need further process and need further information on that event, you could certainly ask for that from the Council's flood risk management team.
The further information you might want, you talk about 1 in 200 years all the time nowadays. How much has this flooded before? Is this the first time it's ever flooded? And when will it flood again? That's the problem, I think.
I mean, Chairman, I having represented that area for some time, but no longer now I'm representing it, I can confirm that there have been both fluvial and coastal flooding at CREETOWN, and it is a serious problem and is likely to become a worse problem. But, you know, in terms of a scientific assessment, I can give you no more than that information as an elected member. Chairman, I'm sort of going through these. What page have we got to in terms of information? Because my feeling is that information would come through as part of a flood risk assessment. That would be part of something that would be done.
I think we've been through all the papers now. It's a case of, do you think you've got sufficient information in front of you to make a decision? Councillor Maitland?
I would suggest, Chairman, that we do, in this particular instance, have sufficient information to take a decision on these papers, yes.
Okay, thank you. And gentlemen, you're quite happy? Well, it'd be debatable whether you can get any more information other than the 490 millimetres. Robert, is there a source of information on the flooding in that area at all? It's maybe a long-term flooding we need to know about more than just the one occasion.
Chair, I'm quite happy if the members of the local review body are asking for extra information from an internal consultee, which Council's Flood Risk Management team is, in relation to that 2011 flood risk event, and you feel you need that information to arrive at a proper decision. I'm quite happy if that is made a request, and we can report this back to a further meeting if that is how members are so minded. And we will set in place a procedure order that asks the Council's Flood Risk Management team for that further clarification of what the inundation level was, what the nature of the 2011 event was. Was it coastal flooding? Was it fluvial? Was it a combination? That kind of information, so that you're not in the dark about that issue at all. Quite happy to do that if that's what members want to do.
I think, if possible, if you could identify flooding at other times as well, that might help the situation. Not just a one-off. We're reading this at the present moment. We've only got indication of one flooding period. Councillor Maitland.
Let's cut to the chase and decide whether we need that information. I I don't want to rain on other members' parades, but literally, but even if I had that level of information, how much it rained and what happened in 2011, that would not give me sufficient information then, I think, to go away from an assessment here which says it has not been demonstrated that there will not be issues of flooding access. So I'm basically saying, is that really sufficient? It might be necessary, but it's not sufficient. And for that basis, I would suggest, Chairman, that we have sufficient information to make the decision here and now.
Okay, Councillor James, are you minded, sir?
Yes, of course. One reason we don't have a lot of information is that there hasn't been a further assessment carried out by the proposer, which is missing. However, my feeling is, because this is already fairly densely populated, there will be ways and means of surviving. If there is a flood, they'll sink and swim together. So I'm minded to vote for the application.
You're looking to go with the recommendation?
Not the recommendation to refuse. No, I would like to permit the development. There's an infill in a area that's been developed already, which is they've all got problems together. I don't think we're going to make it much worse by having one more.
Councillor Fairbairn.
Chair, just for the avoidance of doubt, it's correct there hasn't been a detailed flood risk assessment done for this site, but the figures quoted by SEPA in their consultation response are what they anticipate to be the inundation levels in a 1 in 200 year flood event. So the kind of flood event you can expect to see once every 200 years, an extreme flood event, it's a best estimate, I would describe it as. I wouldn't describe it as a guess, because there's a lot of information goes into that. But that's their best modelling exercise, and it's coming up with that result. So the 2011 flood event will be something different. It's useful information, but really the key issue here is what is going to happen to the best of everyone's anticipation in the 1 in 200 year flood event. So you're trying to predict a scenario and then try and make sure the house and the access are safe from that predicted event. I appreciate there's quite a lot of uncertainty in that, because no one knows what the event's going to look like until it happens.
Right, Councillor Maitland.
Well, Chairman, to get through this Gordian knot, let's deal with the whether or not we need more information. So I am proposing that we do not need more information in order to make the decision today. Councillor Fairbairn needs to explain exactly what we need, and then we vote on it. I think that's what I would suggest, and then we can move on either way, or
Councillor Fairbairn.
Pressing the wrong button. Councillor Maitland, okay, it was concluded that the application should be refused because it had not been demonstrated that the development would not lead to an unacceptable flood risk, and no flood risk assessment or other evidence had been provided by the applicant. If we're stating there was a flood in 2011, surely we need to have the information if that's what you're basing the whole thing on. It clearly states there was a flood in 2011. That is a flood assessment in itself.
And you're saying that just because it's flooded once doesn't mean it should be refused?
I'm not saying it should be refused. I'm saying that it would be good to have that additional information, because if you're mentioning something in 2011, it would be good to know exactly what kind of flooding we had in that area.
You want to comment, Robert?
Chairman, reading of the refusal, looking at paragraph 4.8 of the delegated report, so that's on page 299, is it has not been demonstrated that the development would not lead to an unacceptable flood risk, and that safe vehicular site access stroke egress can be achieved to the site during a 1 in 200 year flood event. So the critical issue is the modelled or estimated 1 in 200 year flood event. But the point about the 2011 event, yes, there's information there that's incomplete. It's alluded to twice within the papers. I don't have full information on that 2011 flood event, but I don't think there is any suggestion that the 2011 flood event was a 1 in 200 year flood event at the same time.
So on the basis of flooding, the recommendation is to refuse this application. Do you want to indicate how you feel about that? Do you want to pursue this flooding? Right, Claire?
Can I just roll this back a little bit? And from what I gather, members were determining whether they had sufficient information to move forward or not. Councillor Maitland was proposing that she had sufficient information to determine the application. Yeah, it hasn't formally been seconded, but...
Yes, I will second that.
And there's an amendment proposed by Councillor Fairbairn that there isn't sufficient information to determine today, and you would request further written information from the Council's flood risk management team in regard to the 2011 flood event in order to come back and further consider. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct. I'm always a stickler for, if you make a point in a document, you need the information to back it up. If you're going to highlight that it's flooded in 2011, we need at least a little tease of what that was and what the effect was in that particular area.
I think though the 2011 event wasn't as bad as the 200-year event. Otherwise, that would have changed their 200-year event calculation, and therefore, if we take the worser case scenario, which is the 490 mil on the road, that would be good enough for decision-making processes. I agree. Probably they should have coloured the 2011 event with the information they did have, but in regards to making the decision, I think we've got enough.
I've been swayed, but we need the information, okay? On the basis of that, I'm not refusing the application, though. I'm just saying that it would have been good to have that information, okay?
Councillor Maitland?
Well, let's just go piece by piece. It's up to you now, Chairman, as to where you're going on this. Councillor Fairbairn, of course, is perfectly within his rights to register his dissent.
I would go with a recommended decision and refuse. It's contrary to...
Would you agree then that you have sufficient information to
Yes,
determine today, and therefore there's no seconder for Councillor Fairbairn's amendment?
And Councillor Fairbairn's dissent to that particular part of it can be recorded.
Okay, is that us finished?
No.
Now we're inching forwards, Chairman, and now we have to decide whether or not we agree with the officer's recommendation or not. For the avoidance of doubt, I would suggest that in this particular instance, we do not have sufficient information in front of us because there is no flood risk assessment to indicate that there would not be danger. So I am going with the recommendation quite clearly.
I'm not sure of the terminology to express the contrary view, but I'm minded to accept the proposal or permit the proposal or not.
If you're wanting to approve the application, you would be looking to reverse the decision of the appointed officer, but you'd have to give planning reasons for doing so and specify any conditions as well that your planning advisor would be able to provide more planning advice.
I think if you're minded to overturn the appointed officer's decision, you could do that as an exception to policy. And in your earlier dialogue, you mentioned a number of reasons why. It wasn't really one reason, it was, I think, about 4 or 5 or even 6 reasons which you felt influenced your thinking on this one and why you felt it should be a departure from policy or an exception to policy. So I think that's quite proper to do that. In terms of planning conditions, again, looking at the consultation responses, you've obviously got plans that then would become approved plans. So I'd recommend a condition that it requires the development to be completed in accordance with the approved plans, just as an absolute safeguard, because there's levels of information on that that's quite critical in this case, and you wouldn't want any departure from that. You've also got roads conditions as well. I'm trying to remember where they appear in the papers now. I've got it noted here. Roads Planning Team Leader, pages 301 to 302. So they've listed 6 suggested conditions. They're in code, but in reality they're fairly straightforward roads conditions, so I would recommend, if you're minded to do that, to include those. A couple of directives that are simply advisory. So in sum total, I would suggest you would really not need more than those 7 conditions, the 6 in the roads consultation response, and the other condition just to require compliance with the approved plans because of the levels of information mainly, to make sure that they're building something, because half a metre here or there might not mean a lot in your normal house, but in this case it will be very significant.
Yes, I'm minded to approve, subject to the aforementioned conditions.
No, I have proposed that we go with the initial decision on the basis that it has not been satisfactorily demonstrated yet. The wording is there already, and I don't find any overwhelming reasons to go to take this as an exception to policy. I will also say that there is a cost to the public purse, which is not necessarily to do with planning, but I'm saying this as an addendum. I can see that there could be problems if you couldn't get access, emergency access, along Silver Street for whatever reason. And so I'm not prepared to go along with this as it stands without having the flood risk assessment done to demonstrate safety. And I propose that. I don't think I have a seconder yet.
We could defer a decision until such times as we get the flood risk assessment or the kind of flood programme, how it happens in CREETOWN. See what effect it has on that area.
I would suggest, Chairman, it's much cleaner that you decide which way you're going and we take a decision on this. That's what I would propose at this stage. Much cleaner and clearer to the applicant. whether this is going to go forward, as Councillor James is suggesting, or whether we refuse it and wait for the applicant to do a flood risk assessment.
You're looking to refuse it. You're wanting to grant it. Councillor Fairbairn.
This is my point exactly. The flood risk assessment, if we had that information from 2011, surely that would have made up part of the case,
You're going against. You want to defer it, or refuse it, or grant it?
I don't want to defer or refuse. I would grant it because I think everything down in this paper is quite in step, other than that information that's missing from 2011 that should have maybe been down. But apart from that, I think everyone's been adhered to in relation to SEPA and the building regulations.
You want to grant it?
Yep.
Along with Councillor James. You want to refuse it? So do I.
Right, got a vote there.
Claire? No, you've got a 2-2.
Yeah, cast your vote. Right, I'll tell you where we are currently. I have a motion proposed by Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor McKee, to basically uphold the decision of the appointed officer and refuse the application. I have an amendment proposed by Councillor James, seconded by Councillor Fairbairn, to reverse the decision of the appointed officer and approve it as an exception to policy, as the application could be regarded as infill development, and given that the surrounding areas built up would have no more flood risk than any others in the area, and this would be subject to conditions, being the 6 road conditions outlined in the papers, and one on compliance with approved plans. So I shall go to the vote.
You have to put in the 8 ball, didn't you?
Chair, motion or amendment, please.
What's the motion?
Motion is to uphold and refuse. And refuse,
yes,
that's you.
I'll go with that.
Councillor Fairbairn. Amendment.
Motion.
You're the amendment. Councillor James. Amendment.
Amendment.
Councillor Maitland.
Motion.
Okay. Got an equality of votes, 2 votes each. Chairman, would you like to use your casting vote?
Got to go with a motion.
Okay. Thank you. Therefore, the motion's carried. The decision of the appointed officer is upheld and the application is refused.
Right, can I thank you all very much for your attendance and your... By God, I've lost a long time. I think the issues you've raised, Douglas, I think it's a point that maybe Robert could take on board, could he?
The difficulty I've got is when I'm compiling cases, I'm not, if you like, acting on behalf of the council. I'm not advocating a particular position here. I simply gather together the information that was in front of the appointed officer when the decision was made. And if there's something missing, like detail of the 2011 flood event here and what that involved, I can't ask for that extra information. I need to get agreement from the local review body to go and ask for it. So I can't go away and say, look, I don't think there's enough information in this area, because that's what was in front of the officer when the decision was made, and that's what you're reviewing. So I can't go away and do that myself. It has to come through the local review body. And you might well decide that you don't have enough information in one area or another, in which case you can ask for it and ask for that extra information to come in front of you if you feel you need it.
But where I was coming from, Robert, was could that be something that's looked on as being a standard information that you supply? Can go through the planning application. Well, obviously the planners do that, but the planners do that, and then when it comes to, if it comes to an LRB, they've got the flood risk and what it's been like in the past, the amount of flooding, what the depth of flooding, that sort of thing.
The key thing in this case, Chair, is it's the 1 in 200 year flood risk assessment that's been asked for and hasn't been submitted, and that's been the missing piece of information. And on that basis, I think the case officer looked at it and thought, well, it's not been demonstrated this is safe in terms of that 1 in 200 year flood event, and that's been the basis of refusal. So if you like the historical flood event, it'd be useful to know about it, but it's not the determining issue.
Really, it's up to the applicant to provide that, is it the case?
The applicant was asked for it and declined.
There's only a certain limit. Okay, folks, I've got no other business. Thank you very much for your indulgence, and you've got two new members there. You've done well, gents. Thank you very much.